Welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, the live TV show all about the legal aspects of your business to help educate you on complex legal terms in an easy to understand manner, to help understand why you need to do certain things in your business from a legal point of view, and to help you develop a plan for the future. Our mission at Business Legal Lifecycle is to help empower all small to medium-sized businesses around the world to get access to legal advice so that they can help build their communities and make the world a better place. Did you know that any business owner is on average 7 months away from losing everything? That is the average time it takes from a successful business to fold when an aspect of their business is not set up correctly. Have you ever wanted to get legal advice but didn't understand what was going on? Do you feel like there is a divide between lawyers and their clients? Then this TV show is for you. It is all about empowering you and your business with the knowledge and tools to ensure that this doesn't happen to you. Business Legal Lifecycle TV delivers a twice-weekly show focusing on the legal aspects of your business. At lunchtime on Mondays, we present Fast Fix Monday, a quick 5 to 10 minute show that will give you some actionable steps to consider for the week for your business. And at lunchtime on Wednesdays, we present our in-depth show of between 30 minutes and an hour, where we go through complicated legal aspects of your business in a simple to understand, plain English manner. And whether that is through educational pieces or interviews with experts in their fields. Hi everyone, and welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV. My name is Jeremy Stretton, one of the founders of Business Legal Lifecycle, and with me is...
Hi everyone, Craig Mason. Thanks for joining us.
So today we're going to do our first show on Phase 9, Investing in Property. Craig, do you want to have a bit of a chat around what this phase is all about?
Yeah, so as the title describes, investing in property, we're concentrating more on investing in real property in this phase. It could be investing in other things in your business, but because we handle a lot of property transactions, we're talking about investing in property in Phase 9. And that's what today's show is going to be about, a deeper dive into investing in property. This month, we're concentrating on this phase. We've got a number of interviews coming up with some exciting people in the field, property developers, those sorts of people. So pretty exciting this month, we think, at least. You're going to get a lot out of it. We know that we're going to as well. We learn new things from property developers all the time. So, as I said, we're doing a deeper dive today for Wednesday's show in investing in property. And we'll go through the different types of property that we're talking about. Jeremy, do you want to get on to the process?
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we kick off, remember everyone to check out, if you're watching this on Facebook, check out the link that we'll post below, which has our worksheet for today's episode. And if you are listening to this on the podcast or through YouTube or Periscope, feel free to check out our website, businesslegallifecycle.com.au/059, because this is actually our 59th show, so which is exciting. So anyway, kicking off to the process. So investing in property is essentially buying real estate, and we're going to go through in the process. We're going to talk about the different types of property. We're going to talk about what to think about before you sign, and then we're going to talk about the due diligence process, because these are all the important things that you need to make sure that you tick off on before you invest in any property. So the process, the buying property process has 10 steps is what we generally go through. So, and some of them might seem obvious, but bear with us and let us go through the 10 steps, and you'll see how they actually all work together. And if you're watching this internationally, the 10 steps are pretty similar across the world if you buy property in any Western country. So the first step is to actually find the property that you want to buy. So what is it that you want to buy? And it might seem obvious, but it's amazing how many people don't actually think about finding the property first before they actually go. So this is where you might want to start talking to a real estate agent. If you're in Australia, you might want to look at realestate.com.au, or if you're in Queensland, or if you're in the New South Wales, Victoria, or South Australia, or Western Australia, you might want to look at domain.com.au. This is where all the different properties are listed. So you want to start to investigate what kind of properties you want to actually buy, decide where you want to buy it, and then go and find some property that you want to buy. Next, you want to conduct a visual inspection on the property. So again, this might seem obvious, but it is amazing how many people don't actually go and physically inspect the property that they're buying. So often that they say they're just going to trust their property agent or a broker or an investment advisor, but you really need to go and actually inspect the property. One, to make sure it exists, but two, to make sure there are no obvious problems with the property. You may not like the area. You may not like the way that it looks in person. You may not like the yard size. You may not like how the yard's made up. You may not like how it's painted inside. There are many things that you may not like that you need to go and have a look at before you go and invest in property. Now, a lot of people might say, well, I don't care, it's just an investment. But at the end of the day, this is something that you're going to put your hard-earned cash into. So you want to make sure that you're getting what you want for that property. So once you decide that you find the property, you need to make an offer. Now, we're going to talk about, before you sign in a bit more detail as well. But here you want to think about the actual offer that you want to make. And this is where you need to get some advice. So is it going to be an auction? So do you need to make an offer as part of that auction? Do you want to try and stop it from going to auction? What do you need to buy the property? So do you need finance? Do you want a building and pest inspection? These are things that you need to think about before you enter into the contract to make sure that you're getting what you buy. You should always conduct a building and pest inspection. You never know what might not be approved in the property. And you also want to make sure that there are no pest problems in the property. So, for instance, a lot of people think that they're buying a brick home and they'll be safe. Well, that's not necessarily true. Brick homes usually have timber frames inside them. So you want to make sure there's no termites or other pests in that property that might cause problems. So you want to make sure that you look at those things. If you're buying a property at auction, you'll generally need to make sure that you've got your finance and your building and pests sorted out before the auction. So make sure that you do your inspections and your searches beforehand. You can make at auctions, definitely in Queensland, and I know in some other states, you can make your offer that you're making at the auction subject to finance or building and pests. However, it's not an equal auction to the other people in the auction, and so different conditions might apply, and the seller doesn't have to accept your offer at that time. So have a think about those. Now, once you make the offer, it's really up to the seller whether or not they want to accept your offer or make a counteroffer. So they have the option of 1, rejecting your offer out of hand, which hopefully they don't do. 2, coming back to you and renegotiating with you. Or 3, accepting your offer. If they accept your offer, great. If they want to negotiate with you, well, this is where you need to have a think about, well, what is a comparison of, or what are you willing to get to? What are your red lines that you think about? There are many different negotiating tactics. Some people say that you should have your red line and then you should work back from that. I know that was a favorite of Steve Jobs and his cohort at Apple and Pixar. Other people do go in with their best offer and say, I'm not interested in negotiating. And they can, the other side can get buggered if they want to try and negotiate. Not really negotiation, it's more a red line. The third method would be to simply go in really low. So some people will go in with a property that might be worth $500,000 and go in with an offer of ridiculously low $350,000 to see whether or not the seller will actually come up to that price. So you need to have to think about the way that you want to negotiate and make sure that you're comfortable with it. Once the offer is accepted, though, you've got a contract, and you really need to be certain of what the terms of that contract are to make sure that you've agreed to them. Once you're at this point, if you haven't done it before, you need to appoint a lawyer or conveyancer. A lot of people think that the conveyancing process is easy, and let's face it, probably I'd say 7 out of 10 conveyancers are pretty straightforward. It's the problem ones that you really are buying insurance for with your lawyer or conveyancer. So you want to make sure that you're got the right people who know what they're talking about so that they can actually get the right searches done and the right process in place to make sure that you don't miss anything in your property purchase. So at this point, if you haven't done it before, you need to start conducting your due diligence in relation to the property. So where a lawyer gets involved, they do searches, they look at council records, they look at contaminated land, they make sure that you're buying what you think you're buying. This might seem obvious, but searches, and we'll talk about due diligence in a minute, can reveal whether or not a property is actually properly constituted. Well, if you don't have that, then you need to make sure that you're actually getting what you think you're buying. So once you've gone through that process, then you need to decide whether or not you want to buy and prepare the transaction documents. So again, in different jurisdictions, there are different rules here, but the transfer of a property is a legal transaction that requires different forms to be provided, usually to government departments, to evidence the transfer. And again, this might seem obvious, but there's a little bit of complexity here. There's particular forms that you've got to use. There's particular ways that those forms are done. Other things that need to be considered are transfer duty or stamp duty might be payable. You might have a property that's part of a body corporate, and you need to make sure that the body corporate's notified that you're now the owner of the property. Once you've got all the transaction documents done, then you need to prepare to settle. Again, this is where your lawyer or conveyancer is crucial. So this really involves liaising with the seller, liaising with your bank, liaising with the seller's bank to make sure that everything is done properly. There'll often be adjustments. So these are, say, rates or water will need to be adjusted on the purchase price. So make sure that you're not paying too much for your property. Or if you've got a body corporate, there'll be body corporate fees, and they'll need to be adjusted as well. So you need to make sure that you have all of that done properly, unless you're paying cash, of course. That might be a little bit different. So the next step is settling the transaction. It's one of my favorite steps because it's actually when you get to buy a property. Never go to a settlement and think, why did I pay my lawyer all the money for something so simple? Because settlement really is the easiest part of the transaction. It's basically where a bunch of people meet, they hand over checks, they hand over paperwork, and then you own the property. So all the hard work is done before settlement. And it's very important to say that you make sure that you're actually getting all the right documents that you're handing over for the money that you've paid. Once settlement's complete, I said there were 10 steps, so that's the first 9. The 10th step is completion and the post-settlement stuff. So this is where documents have to be lodged with titles or the relevant government department that keeps the register of land. Then you might need to notify your body corporate. And basically, this is notifying all the relevant parties that the transfer has happened and that you're now the owner of the property. So that's the 10 steps of the conveyancing process. So if you've got any questions on that, more than happy to help. But Craig, do you want to talk about the different types of property?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Jeremy alluded to, there are different types of property and there's going to be different things you need to do. The process is going to remain the same, but some of the searches are going to differ, those sorts of things. So the 5 main types are residential property, so your unit, townhouse, house. Then you've got industrial property, which is the industrial sheds that you see a lot more developments of those coming up at the moment, where it's an industry zoning. Then you've got general commercial property, so your office buildings, those sorts of things. You've got rural property, so that's out in the country somewhere, and you're buying a large parcel of rural farmland or something along those lines. And then you've got retail shop property, so that's your retail shops in strip malls and those sorts of things. So they're the 5 main types of property that, when we talk about investing in property, is what we're discussing. So as I said, residential property, pretty straightforward. You've got your townhouse, your unit, or your house. This is the main sort of property that people will talk about when they're buying real property. And that might be mostly an investment, rent out, those sorts of things. So you still need to follow the process. You want to make sure you're getting the right type of property. There's no little hidden things in there. It's going to cost you a whole heap of money that you haven't budgeted for, and your investment, instead of being a good thing, becomes a burden. So that's that one, and you could have family members, those sorts of things living in it. When you're renting it out, we'd also suggest that you have a good property manager involved as well. Maybe don't try to do it yourself. We've seen plenty of stories of that going pear-shaped. So that's residential property. The next one was industrial property. So as I said, there's a lot more of these types of developments happening at the moment, sort of on the outside, probably 15, 20 k's from the city in Brisbane at least, and probably similar to that in most other capital cities. There's a lot more industrial zoning and industrial developments getting built. So they're the large sort of shed type buildings where industry, truck drivers and those sorts of things have their shops. So you might want to invest in that sort of property, even if you're not involved in that industry. It's still an investment. Then you've got general commercial property. As we said, the process is the same. The searches become very important. You've got leases and things like that to worry about as well. Same with industrial, but make sure that you're looking at and make the lease and having a advisor actually looking at it and making sure it's a properly drafted lease. Or if you're taking over a property, obviously, and it's an existing lease, and you want to make sure everything's in there and you're happy with that. So you need to look at all those sorts of things. Commercial properties may be part of a body corporate as well, so make sure you look at those searches and go through that process. Follow the steps. Make sure you got your advisors involved. Rural property, straightforward, out on a farm somewhere, but you want to make sure that it's the type of property that you want. You might be investing in rural property in the hope that one day it might be rezoned into something else, those sorts of things. But make sure you look at all the searches and that there's not going to be something hairy in there that you're not aware of. Look at all those sorts of things. It's probably more of a long-term strategy, I would think, unless, of course, you want to run cattle or something on a rural property, then it's probably going to be a long-term type strategy. Then retail shop property, again, you want to make sure that you're looking at the leases, those sorts of things. It can be a bit tricky in that area as well. Talk to your advisors. I think that was 5, Jeremy, or was it only 4? Did I miss one?
That was 5.
That was 5.
That was 5. Residential, industrial, commercial, rural, and retail shop.
Yeah, there you go. All right, okay, good. So that's the 5 different types of property. They're pretty broad sort of categories, but they're the 5 that we see most of when we're talking about investing in property. So yeah, 5 different types. Jeremy.
Excellent. So I'm gonna chat around next around before you sign. So this is what are the things to think about before you sign a contract to go and buy property? Now, it's amazing how many people don't actually do a lot of this stuff, and I think it's really important to do that. So in our worksheet, we'll have some information about to think about these probably 3 or 4 key areas to make sure that you're actually thinking about them before you buy the property. So the first one is entity. So entity, if you've watched any of our previous shows on structures, and feel free to check out the pinned post on our Facebook page, which is our previous shows, where we have an index to our previous shows. And very early on in one of our first shows, we talked about the different types of structures. So I'm not going to go through those. We seem to go through those a bit, but I think they're really important for you to understand. But an entity is the structure that you buy a property in. And there are different reasons for different structures and different entities when you're buying properties. So if you're buying investment property and you're going to buy it in your own name, you might do that because you're negatively gearing the property. Now, my personal attitude to negative gearing is don't do it because why buy something that you're going to lose money on? But some people like it. So if you're going to buy a property and negatively gear it, then you buy it in your own name. If you're going to buy a property that's going to make money, then you should be looking at putting that property into a company or a discretionary trust. And the reason for that is that you can distribute the income in a much better tax-effective way using tax planning to make sure that you're getting the right amount of income and not paying too much tax for your property on that income. Now, there are many ways to be right, and everyone's situation is going to be different. So do not listen to the advice that we're giving you today and go, oh, that sounds like me, I'm going to go with a sole trader or I'm going to go with a trust. Get advice. I can't stress that enough. Everyone's situation is slightly different. You want to make sure that when you're entering into a contract and you're buying a property in an entity, that you're doing that in the right entity for you and your circumstances. Do not skip on the advice here. A quick discussion with your lawyer and or your accountant will solve this problem 9 times out of 10, and you'll be able to get the right structure in place. And the cost savings in the long run will be substantial. So first thing, make sure that you figure out what entity is right for you, and then set that entity up and enter into the contract with that entity. At least in Queensland and other states, it can be very difficult to change the entity later on, and you can actually incur double stamp duty. So stamp duty, is a percent somewhere. It's a sliding scale, somewhere between 1 to 3% of the value of your property. And if you're a foreigner investing in a country, it can be even more. I know in Queensland that's up to like 6 or 7% now. But you need to make sure that you're not incurring double stamp duty if you have the wrong entity. The next thing might seem obvious, but you need to determine the price that you're willing to pay. So I said before that might fall into the negotiation part in the process. But you need to think about what's the price that you're willing to pay, what's the lowest price that you'll be happy with, what's the highest price that you'll be happy with, and work that out. Also, what deposit you're putting down. So if you're putting down a deposit on the purchase of a property, that deposit will normally be 10% or less than the purchase price of the property. Although in Queensland, if you're buying a property off the plan, then you can the seller can take up to 20% without there being consequences. So you need to think about what price you're willing to pay and what deposit you're willing to pay for that property. The next thing to think about, and the next thing that's really critical to communicate to your advisors, is where is the money coming from? We have a conveyancer. She's got 40 years of conveyancing experience, and this is the big bugbear for her, is when clients don't know where they're getting their money from or don't tell her where their money's coming from. Are you borrowing money from a bank? We need to know that. Are you borrowing money from family or friends? Are you investing your own cash into the purchase of the property? You need to be really clear on where your money's coming from so that you can make sure that you can pay for the purchase of the property when it comes to the settlement. It's amazing how often this happens and people don't do it. So make sure that you know where your money's coming from. And the last one is conditions. So I talked a bit about this in the process. You can have contracts that are subject to things like finance, that are subject to things like building and pest. So make sure that you're looking through the conditions and make sure it's subject to the conditions that you want. It's scary that people don't do that simple process and make sure that a contract's subject to another, the things that they want it to be subject to. If it's not in the contract, it's probably not a condition. So if you're a seller and you're entering into a second contract and you don't make the second contract subject to the first one, guess what? It's not subject to that. It can become very difficult. So make sure that before you sign that you're happy with the terms of the contract. And if you're not sure, get legal advice. Get someone to read over it who knows what they're talking about and is going to be able to handle the transaction properly for you. Because if you don't, that's when you get problems. So make sure you get advice before you sign. I get the fact that a lot of people don't want to get advice, legal advice before they sign a contract, but it really is worth its weight in gold. And as I said before, 7 out of 10 times, you're probably not going to have any problems. But it's those 30% of times when a contract has issues that you'll be thankful that you actually went through and got advice before you sign a contract and that you made sure that you ticked off all these things before you signed the contract. So, Craig, do you want to talk about our last topic, due diligence?
Yeah, and just flowing from what Jeremy was saying, particularly with the conditions and where you're getting your money from, if you're selling something in order to buy something else, then that's really important to let your advisors know about because, one, it's going to affect finance, and two, you may need to make your new contract conditional upon you selling the other property. And we see that a lot where people don't do that, and it can cause major problems. So if you're selling something in order to buy something else, make sure you tell everyone that's what you're doing so they can modify things accordingly. And make sure you do all that before you sign, as Jeremy said, because if you sign it, it's very hard to then start making changes because the other side, the seller, may say no. So make sure you do it all before you sign. So talking of conditions, one of the big ones is due diligence. So a lot of contracts, particularly commercial properties, those sorts of things are subject to due diligence. Residential properties, not so much, but they're subject to building and pest or finance, and you can have a due diligence clause as well in residential contracts. And that, the whole point of it is, as it says, allows you to do your diligence on the property. So you're checking out to make sure there's no little landmine sitting there that's going to come up after you've bought it. Making sure that if you're going to develop on it, that you're able to do all those sorts of things. So you've got to do your due diligence, and normally there's a period of time that the contract says you've got to do that by. So it might be 14 days or 21 days or whatever it is. But if you're making a contract subject to due diligence, you need to get onto it normally pretty quickly and make sure you do all the relevant searches. So the first type of search I'm talking about is council, local government searches. So as I said, you want to get onto it quickly because you've got to order the searches and get them back. You then got to look at them and make sure you're happy with them all. So you want to get onto it relatively quickly. In this, you're looking at the zoning, any other council things that are on there. There might be building approvals, those sorts of things. You want to make sure that if there's a new veranda that actually has approval, if there's a pool that it's actually approved. Even if it's got a pool safety certificate, it doesn't necessarily mean that the final approval of the actual pool is there, and we've seen that before. So you need to look at those sorts of things, and just make sure that the building approvals are there. Because if you're not, and you buy the property and you haven't done those sorts of due diligence, then you're essentially stuck with it. If you do it during due diligence, then you've got an opportunity to either negotiate or terminate or whatever it might be. So make sure you're doing the council, local government searches. It also means you can adjust for the rates and those sorts of things at settlement. So as far as searches go, these are a must-do. And as Jeremy said before, you don't sort of skimp on these sorts of things. You're buying, potentially one of your largest assets, so you want to make sure you've done all the relevant searches. The next search is the title and the plan. So this might seem pretty obvious that you want to make sure that the title actually lines up with who you're buying the property from, for obvious reasons. You don't want to be buying the property from someone that doesn't actually own the property. So you want to do the title searches. It's going to show on there that there's any encumbrances, easements, what mortgages, those sorts of things are on there. You want to have a look at that, and you also want to order the plan, again, to make sure that the property you think you're buying is actually the property that relates to the title. That does happen. There might be some changes or whatever it might be, subdivided, etc., but you've got to make sure you're buying the right property, because you can see or understand what an issue that would be if you bought the wrong property. The next one is physical investigations. So you, building inspector, if you're going to be developing, and you might bring out your town planner, your architect, your builder, all those sorts of people to make sure, oh, well, look, you're not going to be able to do that because this or whatever it might be. And you want to check out the property, make sure you're happy with it, make sure your experts are happy that there's no hidden issues, termites, all that sort of stuff. And you want to get a building report so you can have a look at it to make sure you're happy with structurally how it is, or whatever there might be in there that you know about all of that prior to your contract going unconditional. So you're going to do physical investigations, and you might find something when you're doing it. When you're buying a commercial property or an industrial property and there's a lease, you want to be obviously reviewing the agreements that the seller has with their tenants to make sure you're happy with all of those, because you don't want to be stuck with some dodgy lease that you're not happy with. So you want to look at all those sorts of things and make sure you're aware of everything going forward, because you don't want to come up in a couple of years' time and realise that, the rent goes down after 3 years or something along those lines. So you mightn't be able to do anything about it, but at least if you know something, you can adjust your price or whatever it might be. You might be able to renegotiate if you terminate under due diligence. So you want to review all the agreements that might be relevant to the property. It could be residential, so the tenancy agreements, those sorts of things. And that's your opportunity to ask questions as well of the agent, the neighbours, whoever it might be that's willing to talk to you. Make sure you get all the information you think is relevant for the property. So it's pretty important, due diligence. As I said, get onto it quickly, take it seriously, get everyone involved, get your advisors on board, and make sure you're doing it as quickly as you can so you can comply with the conditions, because it may mean that if you don't do it within whatever period of time, the seller may not allow an extension. You might have to waive it without doing all the things that you wanted to do. So get onto it, make sure you do it, and talk to everyone, all your advisors, and get the expert advice. So that's due diligence. I think it's pretty straightforward. Jeremy, what was the last thing we were going to talk about?
Oh, that was it. That's it. So that's everything that we had today for investing in property. We'd like to thank you for watching. We really appreciate the people who watch this on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. And for the people who are listening on the podcast, thank you. Please, if you like this, please like the show and like our Facebook page if you haven't already, and like us and review and comment wherever you're getting this content, because we really like the feedback, and we really like to make sure that people are getting the kind of information that we think is valuable for you, that you're actually finding some value in it. We're going to share the show notes, as I said before. That will be businesslegallifecycle.com.au/059 will be the link to the show notes page. So please go to that page, check out the show notes, and that will have the workbook that we've put together from today's episode. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back on Monday with Fast Fix Monday, or if you're listening to this later, then you can move on to the next one straight away. But as Craig said before, this month's theme is all about Phase 9, investing in property. So thank you very much for listening or watching, and we'll see you on Monday.
Thank you, everyone.